Welcome to the S.J. Childs Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Thanks for joining the S.J. Childs Show. I'm really excited today to meet with someone I've been corresponding with. He is in the UK, and I'm really excited for you all to get to know more about Paul Isaacs. I'm excited to get to know more about him. So, without further ado, hi, Paul. Thanks so much for having or being on the show today, and having your evening with us.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor to meet you. I know that you do a lot of advocating where you're at over there, and kind of met up through those avenues of knowing other advocates. And next time you see Miss Anna Kennedy, give her a big hug for me. She's fantastic. I love to watch all her exciting things she has going on. But I am excited to get to know you more and kind of learn more about your story and hear about your coaching and things that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I may as well start from the beginning in terms of um, developmental history trajectory, and then follow on with what I do currently.
Love
So
it.
yeah, so I was born in '86. So when I talk about my autism in terms of trajectory and presentation, I like to break it down into pieces so that people can at least have a chance to understand what and how I'm talking about it in a way which is at least tangible. So, breaking that down, in '86, I was born. So, part of my autism, or autisms, it's probably better to be called a plural rather than a singular, was prematurity. So, if we think about what prematurity, the nervous system is underdeveloped in some way, and that can in turn have impact on development. Other factors that were quite serious was fetal distress, a placental abruption, which is when the placental wall breaks and oxygen deprivation concurs. So hypoxic injury, so hypoxic brain injury, happened.
Wow.
And just to give people an idea of that in terms of what it is, when the membrane breaks, it in terms of which organ it hits, it is the brain first. So
Mm.
if you think about that in terms of the context of what I'm talking about, hits the brain first, and then in 2 minutes cells start to die in the brain. So my mum was rushed off to the hospital with my father in tow, and I was born through a C-section, a cesarean section, and I was put in what is called a SCABU, which is for light therapy for prematurity. That was because of the hue of my skin, which is to do with bilirubin. And bilirubin is to do with the liver. So if anybody doesn't understand why some
Like a
premature,
jaundice or like a yellower
yeah,
color, huh? Yeah.
exactly, yeah, it was the underdevelopment of the liver, and I had jaundice as a baby. That's correct.
Yeah.
So there were mitigating factors. So fetal distress, cerebral hypoxia, prematurity, a C-section birth. So all these factors are individual to me, and I would say in the first 6 months of life, my mum thought I was deaf and blind,
Mm.
um, because that is how I appeared. Now, in terms of observation, that would be an interesting way of observing and thinking, could that be going on? It was nothing to do with the sensory organs at all. It was to do in which my brain was filtering both visual perception, what I was seeing, and language processing, so what I was hearing. And when I went to preschool in the late 80s, I was about 80% meaning blind. So I didn't see with meaning or didn't perceive with meaning. So I was tactile kinesthetic. So I used to externalize to internalize. So I used to lick, sniff, tap, rub my surroundings
Yeah.
to try and get an idea of what it is, where it is, what its function is, to aid context and association. And as an extension of that, I was face blind. And I can remember knowing my mother and father by sculpting my father's face.
Mm.
So I'd know that that was father, and going through my mother's hair, which I've adopted. She's got curly hair,
Mhm.
and I would know that that was mother. And so during that time, there was a very narrow bandwidth for interpretation. So visual perception, so meaning blind, object blind, meant I saw in bits, not wholes. So it was fragmented vision, and I was about 80% meaning deaf. So there's a very narrow bandwidth for meaning. Body disconnected, so I wasn't connected with my body. Oral apraxic to some degree. So if I did find words within my conscious mind, they wouldn't necessarily come out. They wouldn't kind of join in. My brain and body did not always want to hold hands and play ball, so it would be very difficult sometimes for me to express. There was echolalia, and when I was around 7 or 8 years old, when functional speech did come, it was expressively of a 3-year-old, in terms of content at least. And I had issues around bullying. Now the bullying started in probably late 80s. I was around 3 years old when bullying.
You're kidding me.
Oh yes, yeah, I was bullied. I was, yeah. That's I've got a message about that. So I didn't have functional speech, so I was let out into the world, the wide world, by my parents because they wanted me to get an idea of what the world was and wanted me to be a child. You've got to put it in context that children go out and play in their communities, etc. But I was hit and I was kicked and I was pushed and I was spat at, locked in a cage at 7. This was with a friend. I often tell this story about walking down a track with friends, and these older children grabbed hold of us and had this makeshift cage that was built of, I believe, like fishing wire, so very malleable and bendable wire. We were in there for about an hour. But nevertheless, the bullying was persistent, and it started around 89 and finished around 2015. So this is decades
Oh,
and decades and
yes.
decades of bullying. But the way in which I reasoned all of this out and rationalized it and objectified it and moved on from it was to adopt an idea that those people may well have been unhappy. They may well have had developmental issues and challenges of their own. They may well have come from backgrounds or were in environments that weren't tolerant, or their environments weren't very sympathetic to them. Uh,
Uneducated, yeah.
well, it's not just that. You can't teach somebody something if they're not ready to learn it or they're not in the
So
right
true.
place to.
Mm.
So the way in which I rationalised their behaviour was to humanise them and thank them. And people say, why do you thank them for treating you in such a way? Or people have said this, and it's quite simple. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to have the condition I have. I didn't ask for many things: the color of my skin, the color of my hair, the social class I was born in, etc., etc. So, in essence, you're born, and things happen. It doesn't mean they're right, and it doesn't mean I necessarily procure or validate what happened in terms of agreement. All I'm saying is that I rationalize what happened to me, and I thank them for doing what they did to me, because at least they gave me a very strong foundation of how not to treat people. Because
Yeah.
there's a firm difference between being a victim, being constantly in the cycle of victimhood, which I refuse to be in. So I've been a victim, past tense, of various things, but I refuse to go down the road of victimhood. And that is why I wanted to rationalize and to some degree understand why people do certain things. One must humanize these people, understand their perspective, however hard, and move on or move through, or at the very least, internalize it in such a way that your nervous system is not on edge
Hmm.
all the time
Yeah.
about certain things.
I love that. I mean, what a way to be an example of compassion and, like you said, just humanizing. I love that word. I love to look at people and know that their behavior is communication. In what way they're communicating is however they understand how. And it's kind of like you and I feel like we can take the time to look at that, rationalize that, reconcile those ideas, thoughts, and feelings, and help others to hopefully understand that it's all stemming from somewhere a lack of, you know, compassion or understanding, not being heard, not being in control. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that lack of validation, personal things going on in their lives, projection,
Yeah.
mirroring, whatever. So, yeah, one has to try and rationalize it, because you'll live your life constantly in the past.
Yeah, that's not a good place to go, is it?
No,
No, you gotta, and
no.
it's okay to have memories, but yeah, like you have to just always, I mean, and it's great to look for the future, but being present is where we really should try to be, just to, you know, be appreciating what we have, and especially with someone who has kind of a story where you, I'm sure, have an appreciation for your life. It was a hard route to get into, and you know, now are have come so far. um Congratulations on all of the hard work, and you know, so sorry that you had to go through a lot of those hard times to get to where you are today, but that mindset change, I think that it's so um like it's in everyone. Everybody has the chance to make a choice to stay victim to their past, to their, you know, whatever, or to kind of be the best and try to see how to navigate situations, especially types of social situations where there's, you know, bullying occur, but to really try to navigate those with more understanding. What are some things that like you're doing now with your life to try to make those changes happen?
I suppose, to answer that question, I have to break that down. In terms of making that happen, the point I made prior still stands, that you can only meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to speak to 100 people in a room and only one person got it, that'd be enough for me.
I like that.
Because it it you have to accept where people are, because we all start with no knowledge about anything. We all start as novices. We all start with limited or no knowledge at all. So you have to work from where people are and accept that people aren't where you are for various different reasons. So that's the first point. The second point is that people bat around stereotypes around autism. I've been in this game for about 13 years, the advocacy movement. And there's highs and lows, personal highs and lows, professional highs and lows. But stereotypes, are being created left, right, and centre, and then they get per se, and then new ones are created. So we have to kind of ditch this kind of rhetoric, collectivist notion that all autistic people think, act, and behave the same.
Yeah.
So that in turn goes with my ethos around this subject, which was by a mentor and a friend called Donna Williams, who sadly passed away 6 years ago. This either late this month or in April, she died of cancer. And she was on the autism spectrum. She was a lecturer, a speaker, and an author. And she was born in the early to mid 60s. And her diagnosis, as dated as it was childhood psychosis. So that just gives you an idea of what they thought autism was in the 60s. And she devised a analogy of autism, which I use, called the fruit salad analogy, where one breaks down autism into its individual parts, which are unique to each person. Now, these conditions on their own are conditions in their own right. They're not autism. I'm sorry to say if that upsets people, but they're not. What makes someone autistic or present autistically is if there's enough components. So if you go back to what I said about my development, I have prosopagnosia, which is face blindness. I had object blindness, which is semal agnosia. You can look all these up. I had meaning blindness, visual associative agnosia, semantic agnosia, body disconnectivities, body agnosias, and pain agnosias, oral apraxia. So already with all those different words and all those different pieces, you're building up an autistic presentation. Language processing challenges, receptive expressive aphasia. And some of these things cross over into acquired brain injury anyway. The only difference is that I was born with them. So I don't know what it's like to not experience them in terms of my reality. Does that make sense, what I've just said?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, hopefully to the listeners as well, but yeah. I'm also well versed in my autistic self and my family members, my husband, 2 kids, and myself. So, and I was the last one to find out on my own and as an adult, and it's been fascinating.
Indeed. And it is, and it's very personal and it's individual. So that's the ethos I use, and then I extend that into other areas. So that was information processing. Then you've got personality types, personality traits, adjustment, disordered extremes. Then you've got mental health. So mental health conditions are some are more common than others. Anxiety, dissociation, psychosis, attachment, impulse control. And then you've got environment, so the person's environment, and this could be cultural. It could be to do with many different aspects of environment. You've got to look at mitigating factors, so that it could include class, that could include colour, race, and creed. It can include culture, etc. And then you look at other things, such as is a person isolated or alienated? Is a person in a situation where the parents are mourning for the child, that they never had, the psychological phenomena that may not get addressed, is to be empathic to these parents who may be going through their own trials of understanding and acceptance. And sometimes the worrying aspect is it could be potentially met with judgment. But people, again, you can only meet them where they are. And if this is actually happening, maybe a kindly word or some comfort for those individuals, that
Yeah.
rather than judging them on having these thoughts and feelings,
Beautifully said.
you could have issues around cat, that what Donna used to call cat versus dog people. So cat people are more aloof, and I'm quite aloof. I'm not arrogant. I think people confuse the two. To be arrogant is to think you're above people.
Yeah.
To be aloof is to be slightly standoffish, which I am. I don't necessarily like to be in the mix. I like to observe. I'm naturally a very solitary person anyway, which
Yeah.
makes me look more archetypally more autistic. But
Yeah.
you can be solitary without autism, but nevertheless, you can get people who have exposure anxiety, whose nervous systems are triggered by self-awareness, so they go into compulsive and impulsive diversion retaliation responses to direct communication to being made self-aware. And these people may have a nervous system which is on a hair trigger.
Yeah.
And I had exposure anxiety, and it was very challenging. So being indirect with the way you speak, in direct confrontation, not watching, waiting, expecting, not being a helicopter, um, things like that. Whereas the dog people are the people where, as the analogy proceeds, the people that you just can't give them enough in terms of stimulus. And then we go into other areas such as data and nutritional disabilities, which
Yeah.
people think is quackery, and it really isn't.
No,
Um,
I agree. It's
Donna
serious.
Donna spoke about her own troubles with candida, and thrush, that was just in her gut. I mean, people think
Yeah.
of it in various places, usually, which you can get them, but it can migrate to the gut, into the mouth, into
Yes.
the ears, etc. She had vitamin malabsorption. She had salt wasting condition. So
Yeah,
her
my
condition,
aunt
her
has this as well, and I've actually never talked to anybody about it or had anyone explain anything in that same way. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no,
That's so interesting though, and now it kind of like think jogging my
yeah,
thoughts about that.
yeah, and that will affect pre-existing information processing challenges. So it may entrench what you've already
Mhm.
got. It may amplify what you've already got. And what I'm so pleased with, because she had Ehlers-Danlos type 4,
Okay.
is you're seeing more about Ehlers-Danlos collagen disorders, where on one side you can have hypermobility, stretchy skin, dislocated joints or subluxed joints, very painful, to the stuff that she had, where it was actually having a very dramatic and serious effect on her cardiovascular system, her arteries, popping. She would often describe like her arteries were popping. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it was really quite profound. And also, I remember her writing a story about her cousin who had undiagnosed EDS, and she was having a baby, and because it wasn't diagnosed, because I don't think people realize collagen is the glue that binds your whole body together.
Mm.
And the organs ruptured because as the baby was growing, it actually ruptured some of her organs. So I think we have to, one talks a lot about information processing, as you do, but then we have to have space to recognize that there are other people on the spectrum that have dietary disabilities.
Mm.
There are other people on the spectrum that have gut, autoimmune, and metabolic conditions, collagen conditions, seizure disorders, or conditions,
Yes.
whatever your preference for words are. And that is what I like about the fruit salad analogy, is that it's giving a platform for people to understand themselves,
Mhm.
or understand their loved ones, or
Yeah.
understand the children, teenagers, or adults they work with. Because if we're going to ditch the stereotypes, which I see a lot, and I've seen them on social media,
Mm,
Instagram, whatever, it's about filtering that information in a way which may garner anger. It may garner annoyance. I know it has for me over the years,
right.
where people get angry with this analogy or get frustrated, which is fair enough. But I think people at least have to realize what the intentions of the work were. So going back to what you said about my work and my speeches, this analogy in various different contexts, be it educational, be it in residential settings, be it in care homes, be it in conferences with parents or autistic people, whatever the context is, I mold my speeches around this analogy.
I love that. I have really learned so much from you today. I'm really glad that we got to come together and have this. Anything coming up that you want to tell us about, or any books? Have you written any books? You writing any books? Anything like
Uh,
that in
yeah,
undergoing?
I mean, some years ago, I continue to write blogs,
Yeah.
but I did write books, um, 5 books. They're very small. The first one was an autobiography, and that was actually over. The very first book was over 10 years ago.
Wow.
So if you type my name on Amazon, in Amazon.com, obviously over there, in America, you can type Paul Isaac's Autism, you'll find my books.
Great. Yeah, I think that that's great. And do you have a website?
Yes, it's Google Sites. It's got quite a long link name. So
We'll link
again,
it down there. You
yeah,
don't, yeah,
yeah,
you don't even have to worry about that. I'll have all of your links and everything. I'll make sure to have all of that in the show notes for you. It's been so nice to hear your story, and it's great that you are putting so much passion and effort into helping others understand and just be compassionate and more flexible, and kind of stop for a moment maybe, instead of jumping to a conclusion or thinking might know somebody. Get to know them, ask a
yeah,
question, like be willing to let your child ask questions. Let them, if they want to know about somebody that is different, please let them ask you questions and ask the individual. I mean, oftentimes it's a fine line between, and I think it's really in the way that you come across, in how that you approach people. Some people don't want to be on display for those purposes, but other people are so compassionate about the process of children and them being just innocent to the knowledge that they're looking for. It's, you can tell when a kid is just genuinely interested in
yeah,
curiosity, or whether it's has malintent, of course. But in the instances that it is just general curiosity, talk to them, give them the information. My husband, I just bless his heart, gave me the best quote to say the other day. He comes up with these amazing quotes for me, and then I get to take all the credit for them. So I'll give him a little bit of credit. But we talked about um, teach your children now before the world has a chance to do it for you. And I think that's
yeah,
so
yeah.
powerful.
Oh, it is. It is a powerful sentiment and quote, because what you're expressing is that the psychological aspect of caregiving is in the first 7 years of life. And I learned this from a counsellor. A child, be it whether they're autistic or not, will on some level internalize their caregiving environment as what the world is. And of course, we know that being a parent and a caregiver isn't perfect. So it may come with biases, it may come with prejudices, it may come with warped sense of what the world is. For example, where I live, the village where I live in the United Kingdom is unfortunately quite a bigoted place in terms of the way it views disability, colour, race, sexuality, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the people, sadly, around here, they believe in what their parents and surrounding individuals said to them
Yeah.
about different people. And your husband's quite right that if you if you educate children before that ball starts rolling, that means you've got a lot less things to unpick,
Mm-hmm.
because then you don't necessarily have to have those educatable moments,
Mm-hmm.
because the seeds of well, better seeds have been sown. I
Yeah.
mean, Jane Elliott, I have great admiration for. Who's a um, anti-racism campaigner and lecturer, and I don't know if you're familiar with Jane
No.
Elliott. Please do look her up.
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah, and you may have heard of this, because even what I've known with Jane's work is that it's usually when I say what the experiment was, it was the blue eyes, brown eyes experiment. Have you heard of this?
I actually have heard of that.
That is Jane Elliott.
Wow.
And it was after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and she wanted to get children to understand what it was like to have one part of you, which she thought of what skin is, what is the fundamental aspect of skin, which is melanin, which is in your eyes. It's a pigment.
Mm.
And so that is where the blue eyes, brown eyes test came from. So it was where the brown eyed people uh, um, would be superior, and the blue eyed people would be subjugated, viewed as inferior. And she took photos of the children at the beginning of the week with blue eyes, and she took a photo of them at the end of the week, and there was a clear difference in the way in which they were sitting. Their nervous system was more primed. Their body language was potentially suggesting being trauma, being downtrodden, being
Yeah.
their energy had been exacerbated.
Mm.
And I think that's a very poignant message about, if one starts treating people in a way which is socially accepted as inferior. Now, what I mean by that is, it's a sad fact that in some places in the world, bigotry is accepted as fact, and there's no room for discourse, or there's no room for discussion or argument or debate. And I feel with her work, which makes one reflect on what it is to be a human being. Another aspect I think that is crucial is, and it kind of plays into what I say about the problems with the advocacy world, is this celebrityism.
Mm.
I do not like. I don't mind real. You can be real. You can be
Yeah.
real on TikTok. You can be real on Instagram. You can be real on YouTube. You can be real. Something that's socially binding, something that is communicating authenticity and realness, and one isn't being a sellout or
Mm.
being part of a machine. And this goes back to the stereotypes, what I said before, just batting out stereotype after stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
and one loses hope. So we have to look at different people on the spectrum in terms of presentation. So that means we're going to have to look into places and into people and into lives that potentially is initially quite uncomfortable. That this is where it has to go. If you want true neurodiversity, this is my argument about neurodiversity. If you want true neurodiversity, you have to go to those areas,
Mm. Yeah.
because can't be just about people who are verbal or speaking. It's got to be about other people from other cultures, from other creeds, male, female, black, white, you name it. It has to garner a wider palette, because then what you're getting is a better idea of what autism is. In fact, I'll be quite frank, autism doesn't really exist, at least not in the way we think about it currently. And what I mean by that is because there are so many stereotypes, people just do not want to look at it as something that is actually tangible. You remember what I said earlier in the conversation about face blindness, object
Mm-hmm.
blindness. All these things are tangible. Once they're hard to get if you're new, and it was
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to understand. It's taken me, I'd say, about a good 5 or 6 years to get a grasp of what Donna was talking about, but I consider it worthy. By no means am I saying this analogy is easy, but it's not meant to be easy because people aren't. People
No.
are
Mhm.
complicated. People are
Absolutely.
complex. So,
So complex. Yeah.
so I think if we're going to look at neurodiversity in its totality, then we have to think about the whole thing,
Hmm.
in terms of different lives and experiences, and not denying their reality because it doesn't fit the current narrative. You have
Yeah.
to ditch all those things, really. And rather than collectivism, I wrote this in a blog, which has been posted recently. We have to look at individualism. If we think autism is a collective condition, that's where it's going wrong,
Mm.
because it doesn't, the amount of people I've met on the spectrum who are not like me and vice versa would suggest that we're not all the same. There are some people on the spectrum who
Mm.
aren't face
Yeah.
blind. There are some people who are more logical and literal than me. There are some people who live in a more pattern, theme, and feel world. There are some people who are, I would say, very emotively introspective. There's people, friends, fruit on. I've got a really lovely lady, the mum Lisa Sydney Edmond, who is functionally non-verbal, non-speaking, and uses facilitated assisted communication devices to
Mm.
speak. And she's a wonderful poet and artist. I urge anyone to check out her work.
Mm.
I believe she does sell prints of her paintings, and she loves fashion as well as I do. I love
Mm.
poetry,
Love
creative
that.
writing, art, fashion. And what I learned a lot from Sid is, this yearning, to be listened to be
Mm.
heard, to be seen as a human being. And again, there needs to be more platforms for functionally non-verbal, non-speaking individuals.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm saying it because it's a fad or that I'm going to change my mind in the next 2 weeks. This is something I brought up every so often because it's true.
Mm.
I'm certainly not doing it out of anger, maybe more frustration rather
Mm.
than the latter. But I'm also fully aware that people, again, it goes back to what I say, people aren't ready. And if
Yeah.
people aren't ready, you can't push it. You can, what I've learned to do over the years is rather than push it, just let it go. Just
Mm.
put it out there
Plant a
and see.
seed. Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that
because
true?
you over the analogy of the seed is quite good, because if you overwater a seed, it doesn't flourish.
Hmm.
You just
Yeah.
have to wait for it to grow slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. You a lot like my husband, like the analogies and like, like to explain things that way. I think it's so fascinating and beautiful. And I'm the creator, the poet, and I love all of those things too. In fact, it jogged my memory of a friend that I had met. He is also speaks on a device, and he is in Germany. He's written poems and children's books and does plays music. I want to say either the piano or the harp, but something pretty incredible. But he's just growing. His name is Florian Mueller. He's in Germany. So check out his work too. You might find his
Yeah,
story
I've
and stuff
heard his
just
name.
fascinating. Oh, he's incredible. I had the wonderful honor and opportunity to also he wasn't actually able to be a part of the show, but his uh therapist that has been working with him for like 20 something years or something was the one who I did the interview with, and but a beautiful friendship that has come out of it all. And oh, it's amazing to be able to make this happen through this medium around the globe. Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing?
yeah. And furthermore, I think on that, there's a brilliant documentary. I don't know if you've heard it, about people who communicate and type to speak, called Wretches and Jabberers. It was a
Hmm.
documentary. It's a DVD, um, and it's quite amazing. It follows two men they're in their 60s now. They're in their 50s then. Uh, I remember one of the gentleman's name. His name was Tracy, and it was Tracy and Larry. That's it.
Hmm.
And they went round the parts of the world, finding other autistic individuals who type to speak. So I highly
Oh,
recommend that. It's called Wretched
absolutely.
Gabberers.
Thank you.
Tracy is on Facebook, and I believe Larry is as well. Um, I'm thinking of who else I've befriended. Henna. I think she comes from Finland. She was on the documentary,
Hmm.
and one of the things I noted that all of them had in common was they were observers of the world. They had to be, didn't they?
Yeah.
What was there were two things that seemed really interesting. They were all creative in different ways. One of them was an artist. The other one was a poet.
Hmm.
Do you see the sort of thread? And they all seem to have this deep, emotional, introspective way of looking at themselves and others when they typed, which I actually think belies the myth and is another
Yeah.
myth busting exercise that autistic people are potentially emotionally redundant. It was
Mm.
quite clear that all these individuals were very emotionally attuned individuals
Hmm.
in different ways.
Absolutely.
So I, it's kind of good that we've got onto this subject, because I don't think it really gets spoken enough about. So it's
Yeah.
kind of good that we've kind of flowed into this area of facilitated and assisted
Absolutely.
communication. Yes, yeah, very interesting.
I want to be as compassionate and just understanding and learning all the time about as many things and as many people as I can. And I just feel like it brings so much more to me. And then I can implement the things I learn if they're great, or try and do whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's so fascinating. I can't imagine what it would be like to kind of be just in a place where I wasn't learning or wasn't trying to get out there and meet people. And like, unlike the observers, I'm the outgoing, the one that likes to be and talk to everyone. But I think at that time, it also helps me make real true connections with people. And it's so heartwarming to me to think of all of the relationships and voices and just ideas that I've been able to share, having a platform. I never expected or anticipated it would grow to such amazing feats, but I'm just so honored by all the guests and listeners that support that we've had here to do this. And so, yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
you're welcome. Yeah, yeah, very very nice to meet you.
Yeah, really great conversation. Well, I hope that we can catch up again sometime in the future, possibly, and we do stay connected on social media. So I will see you then. See you there around there, I'm sure. Uh and thank you so much for really explaining so in depth and complexly what some of our listeners might not have understood before.
Yeah, you're welcome. I try.
Yeah, you're brilliant, and I just appreciate you so much. Well, I am really excited we did this, and I hope that we can stay in touch for sure.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah, we
Okay.
can.